Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've always liked experimenting with my appearance. Body modifications fascinated me, and over the years I'd collected quite a few piercings. I had a lip ring, a septum piercing, 2 earrings in both ears, and a nostril piercing. I also used to have a belly button piercing, but that one didn't work out so well. It rejected after a few months, and let me tell you, dealing with a rejecting piercing is absolutely terrible. The skin gets inflamed, starts pushing the jewelry out, and it hurts like hell, while leaving a nasty scar. After that experience, I became way more careful about what piercings I was willing to get. At the time I was dating this guy, though looking back I'm not sure why I stuck around as long as I did. We weren't compatible at all. He seemed way more interested in how I looked than who I actually was as a person. His compliments were always about my appearance and never about anything deeper. I was still figuring myself out back then, so I thought maybe things would get better if I gave it time. They didn't. One random afternoon while we were hanging out at my apartment, he suddenly asked me something that caught me completely off guard. He wanted to know if I'd ever thought about getting my nipples pierced. The question came out of absolutely nowhere. We hadn't been talking about piercings or body modifications or anything even remotely related. I was confused about where this was coming from, but I answered honestly. I told him that yes, I had definitely considered it before and thought it would look really cool. But then I explained why I couldn't go through with it. First off, the pain scared me because that's such a sensitive area. More importantly though, nipple piercings are notoriously difficult to heal properly and they reject all the time. Given what happened with my belly button piercing, I had good reason to believe my body would probably reject nipple piercings too. I wasn't about to put myself through that whole nightmare again just for some jewelry that might not even last. He seemed to understand my reasoning, so I figured that was the end of the conversation. About a week later, we were watching television together when something on the screen apparently reminded him of the topic. He brought it up again casually, mentioning how attractive he thought nipple piercings were. I felt irritation bubbling up inside me, because I had already given him a thorough explanation about why I couldn't get them. But I tried to be fair and consider that maybe he'd just forgotten our previous conversation. Or maybe he only remembered the part where I said I wished I could get them and didn't retain the reasons why I couldn't. So I explained it all over again, but this time I was firmer and clearer about it. I made absolutely certain he understood that it wasn't going to happen, and laid out all my reasons once more. A few days passed, and I started feeling really insecure about the whole thing. The fact that he'd mentioned it twice now was getting to me. It made me wonder if he was secretly disappointed with how I looked. Maybe he thought I wasn't attractive enough without the modifications he wanted. Maybe every time he looked at me, he was thinking about how much better I'd look if I had what he was suggesting. These thoughts were eating at me, so I decided to be upfront with him about how his repeated comments were affecting me. I told him that bringing this up multiple times was making me feel bad about myself. It was something I genuinely wanted, but physically couldn't have without risking serious problems. And his persistence was making me feel like he didn't truly appreciate me as I was. He got kinda defensive at first and said I was making too big a deal out of it. But eventually he backed down and said he understood where I was coming from. He promised he wouldn't mention it anymore. I really believed him. But I should have known better. Roughly a week later we were in bed together when he started the whole thing up again. This time he began by acknowledging that he knew I didn't want to get the piercing, but then he launched right into his pitch anyway. He went on about how attractive he thought it would be if I got my nipples pierced and how much he'd enjoy it. Something inside me just snapped. I'd explained my position 3 separate times now. I'd been patient and understanding. I'd even opened up about how his comments were hurting my self-esteem. And still, here he was, completely ignoring everything I'd said because he cared more about what he wanted than about respecting my boundaries. I decided right then that I was done trying to reason with him. He clearly needed a different kind of lesson. I stayed completely calm and let him finish his entire speech without saying a word. Then I told him in the most genuine, sincere voice I could manage that I'd always thought there was something that would be really attractive too. He asked me what I meant, seeming curious and hopeful. I told him I thought it would be incredibly hot if he got pierced in his sensitive area down there. The effect was immediate and dramatic. He physically recoiled away from me like I'd suggested something absolutely horrifying. He shouted out in disgust about how painful that would be and how awful the whole idea was. His reaction was so over the top that I almost laughed. I looked at him and said exactly one word. I told him that was exactly my point. I watched his face as understanding slowly dawned on him. He'd just had a visceral, horrified reaction to the idea of getting a piercing in a sensitive area of his body, yet he'd spent weeks pushing me to do the exact same thing. The total hypocrisy of his behavior seemed to finally click in his mind. He sat there in stunned silence, probably replaying all our previous conversations in his head and realizing how ridiculous he'd been. He never brought up the subject of nipple piercings again after that night. In fact, his whole attitude shifted. He became much quieter about commenting on my appearance in general, like he'd suddenly realized that maybe he should keep some of his opinions to himself. Our relationship didn't survive much longer after that incident. I came to understand that I deserved to be with someone who respected me enough to listen the first time I explained something important, not someone who needed to experience the same discomfort themselves before they could grasp basic respect and boundaries. My husband and I got engaged about a year and a half ago. We'd been together since college and decided pretty early on that if we ever got married, we wanted to do something different, something that felt like us. Neither of us wanted the traditional big church wedding with 200 guests and a reception hall that looked like every other reception hall. We wanted an adventure, so we planned a destination wedding in Bali for January. We knew it was asking a lot of people to travel that far, so we made some decisions about who we'd help and who would need to cover their own costs. Our parents paid for themselves, which they insisted on. But our closest friends, the people we really wanted there, we told them we'd cover their flights and hotels. It wasn't cheap. Flights were running about $2,000 per person and hotels were anywhere from $150 to $300 for the week. But these were the people who mattered most to us, and we wanted them there. One of those people was my friend. Let's call her Karen because honestly, that's what she turned into. We've been friends for over 10 years. We met in high school and stayed close through college, even though we went to different schools. She was always the person I called when something good happened or when everything felt like it was falling apart. When I got engaged, she was one of the first people I told. She got married herself about 6 months before my wedding. It was a quick courthouse thing followed by a small dinner. She told me they were keeping it simple because they didn't have a lot of money and wanted to save for a honeymoon eventually. I understood. Not everyone can afford a big wedding, and I respected that she was being practical. When I sent out the invitations for Bali, I told her we'd cover her flight and hotel. She seemed excited. She asked if she could bring her new husband along, and I said of course, but we could only cover her costs. If she wanted to bring him, she'd need to pay for his ticket. She said that was fine and that she'd figure it out. A few weeks later, she confirmed they were both coming. She'd bought his ticket. I was happy. I liked her husband well enough, and I figured it would be nice for her to have him there since she wouldn't know many other people at the wedding. The week of the wedding arrived. My husband and I flew out early to handle last-minute details and make sure everything was set. Our friends started arriving over the next couple of days. Everyone checked into their hotels. Everyone except Karen and her husband. I texted her the day before the wedding, asking if everything was okay with their flight. She said they'd landed fine and were settling in. I didn't think much of it. I figured they were tired from the travel. The day of the wedding came. I was nervous and excited and running on about 3 hours of sleep. I kept looking for Karen during the ceremony setup. She wasn't there. I thought maybe she was running late. The ceremony started. She wasn't there. The ceremony ended. Still no Karen. I tried not to let it ruin the day. We'd put so much work into this wedding, and it was beautiful. The ceremony was on the beach at sunset. The reception was at this gorgeous villa with string lights and tropical flowers everywhere. Our friends danced and laughed and celebrated with us. But in the back of my mind, I kept wondering where Karen was. The next day, I finally got a hold of her. I asked her what happened, if everything was alright, if there was an emergency. Her response made my stomach drop. She told me they were fine. She said they just decided not to come to the wedding. I asked her what she meant by that, pointing out that she'd flown all the way to Bali. She confirmed they were there and mentioned they were actually having an amazing time because the beaches were incredible. I told her I didn't understand why they didn't come to the wedding. She explained that they couldn't afford their own honeymoon when they got married. So when I offered the free trip to Bali, they figured this was the perfect opportunity. Then she added that her husband decided the morning of my wedding that he just didn't feel like going to it. They wanted to explore the island instead. I sat there staring at my phone, reading her message over and over. I couldn't process it. She took the free plane ticket I paid for, used the hotel room I paid for, flew to Bali for my wedding, and then just didn't show up because they wanted a free vacation instead. I asked her directly if she used my wedding as a free honeymoon. She admitted that when I put it like that, it sounded bad, but pointed out that I was paying for everything anyway, so it wasn't like it cost me extra. That line stuck with me. It's not like it cost you extra. Except it did cost me extra. It cost me $2,000 for her plane ticket. It cost me however much the hotel was for the week, and it cost me the presence of someone I thought was one of my closest friends on one of the most important days of my life. I talked to my husband about it when I finally stopped being too angry to speak. He was furious. He said we should ask her to pay us back for the ticket and hotel. I agreed. I sent her a message asking her to reimburse us for the costs since she didn't actually attend the wedding. She refused. She said it was a gift and that we never said the money was conditional on her attending. She said we were being petty and that she thought we'd be happy she got to have a honeymoon. Now I'm considering taking her to small claims court to get the money back. My husband thinks we should. Some of our other friends think we should just let it go and cut her out of our lives. My parents think suing a friend is extreme, but I keep coming back to the fact that she lied and used us, and I don't see why we should be out thousands of dollars because she decided our friendship didn't matter enough to show up. I organize kids' birthday parties and events. The gig pays about $30 an hour, and I usually book 2 or 3 parties every weekend. This weekend, I was hired to run a Halloween party for a 7-year-old. The parents rented out a community center, decorated it with fake cobwebs and plastic skeletons, and hired me to organize games and activities for about 20 kids. They were paying me $200 for 4 hours of work. Standard stuff. Pin the spider on the web, a costume parade, some relay races, and a piñata shaped like a pumpkin. Easy money. The party started at 2 in the afternoon. Kids started showing up in their costumes. Superheroes, princesses, a dinosaur, couple of vampires. Everyone was excited and running around showing off what they wore. Parents were dropping them off and heading out saying they'd be back at 6. I was setting up the first game when this woman walked in with her son around 2:15. The kid was maybe 8 or 9, dressed in this elaborate executioner costume. Black hood, fake axe that looked pretty realistic, the whole deal. But what caught my attention was the hook attached to his right hand, not a plastic one. This thing was metal, about 6 inches long, curved and sharp at the tip. It looked like something you'd use for actual fishing, or maybe hanging meat at a butcher shop. I walked over right away and told them the costume looked cool but the hook needed to come off before we started the activities. The woman asked me what I meant by that. I explained that the hook was sharp and I couldn't have that around the other kids during the party. She told me it was part of his costume and that he was supposed to be the hookman. I said I understood, but it was still a safety hazard with 20 kids running around and someone could get hurt. She said her son knew how to be careful and that he wasn't going to hurt anyone. I explained it wasn't about being careful because kids bump into each other and play rough, and that hook could seriously injure someone. She asked if I was saying her son was violent. I said no, I wasn't saying that at all, but that the hook itself was dangerous and needed to come off. She crossed her arms and stared at me like I'd just insulted her entire family. She told me they spent $200 on this costume and that the hook was the main part and he was going to wear it. I said then unfortunately he couldn't participate in the party because I was responsible for these kids' safety. She said I couldn't kick him out because they were invited. I told her I wasn't kicking him out but just asking her to remove a dangerous object, and that was it. She said if I had a problem with it, I could take it up with the birthday boy's parents. I told her I'd be happy to do that and went to find them. The father was in the back room getting more ice for the drinks. I explained the situation and he came out to look at the hook himself. He told the woman the same thing I did, that it needed to come off. She said her son had been wearing this costume to different events all week and nobody else had a problem with it. The father said he didn't care what other people allowed, but this was his son's party and that hook was a liability. She huffed but didn't move. Her son was already wandering toward the other kids, swinging his arm around to show off the hook. I could see parents who were still there dropping off their kids, starting to notice and look concerned. One mother actually grabbed her daughter and moved her away from the boy. I followed him over to the group. He was showing how the hook worked to two girls dressed as witches, swinging it back and forth way too close to their faces. The tip of that hook was coming within inches of their eyes. I told him to be careful with that thing. The kid said to look how cool it was and that it was real. He swung it again, and one of the girls stepped back nervously. Her friend told him to stop because he was scaring them. He laughed and swung it closer. I reached out and gently grabbed his wrist to stop him from swinging. I told him I knew it was cool, but he needed to take it off now. Before I could say anything else, I felt hands on my back and suddenly I was on the ground, hit the floor hard enough that my shoulders screamed in pain and my cheek smacked against the tile. Looked up and saw the woman standing over me, furious. She yelled at me not to touch her son. I got to my feet slowly. My shoulder was throbbing and I could feel my face starting to swell where it hit the ground. Several parents had rushed over and one of them asked what happened. I said she pushed me. She said I grabbed her son. I said I stopped him from swinging a weapon at other children. She said it wasn't a weapon but a costume piece. Another parent said that hook was absolutely a weapon and asked what she was thinking bringing that to a kid's party. She said her son had every right to wear what he wants. The first parent said not when it endangers other kids. A third parent said they saw the whole thing and that I barely touched the kid's wrist while her son was being aggressive with a hook. The birthday boy's father had already called the police. The woman tried to leave, but several parents blocked the door. She started yelling about harassment and illegal detention. Her son started crying and asking what was happening. She told him everything was fine and that these people were just being mean. The whole thing was chaos. Police showed up about 10 minutes later. 2 officers. I explained what happened, showed them the hook, and pointed out the red mark on my face where I'd hit the ground. My shoulder was killing me, and I asked if I could sit down. One of the officers got me a chair. Multiple parents backed up my story. 3 of them said they saw her push me. 2 others said they saw the boy swinging the hook dangerously close to other kids before I intervened. The officers tried talking to the woman calmly, but she kept saying she had done nothing wrong. She said I'd assaulted her son by grabbing his wrist and that the hook was perfectly safe and everyone was overreacting. One officer told her that she pushed someone to the ground and that was assault. She said she was protecting her child from an attack. The other officer asked her protecting him from what, since I was just stopping her son from swinging a sharp object near other children's faces. She repeated that her son wasn't doing anything wrong and that I was the one who started it. The officer asked if anyone else saw me start it, and all the parents said no. They asked if I wanted to press charges. I said yes. My shoulder hurt like hell and this woman clearly didn't understand the problem. Maybe a night in jail would help. They arrested her right there, handcuffed her and everything. She screamed the entire way to the police car about lawsuits and discrimination and how she was going to sue everyone. Her son was picked up by his grandmother about an hour later. The grandmother apologized repeatedly and said she had no idea her daughter had let the boy wear that hook to a party. She took the hook off right away and put it in her purse. The party continued after that, but the mood was definitely dampened. I did my best to get the kids refocused on the games. The piñata helped. Kids always perk up when candy is involved. By the time parents came back at 6, most of the kids had forgotten about the earlier drama. I went home with a sore shoulder and a bruised face, took some pain medication, and iced both. The next day I went to the doctor to make sure nothing was seriously damaged. Doctor said it was just bruising and gave me a note documenting the injuries. Cost me $50 for the visit even with insurance. I pressed charges. Assault and child endangerment. The court date was set for 3 weeks later. The woman showed up who is a lawyer who tried to argue that I had no right to touch her son. I had 3 parent witnesses who testified that the boy was being dangerous and that I intervened appropriately. The judge asked the woman why she thought it was acceptable to send a child to a party with a sharp metal hook. She said it was part of his costume and that he'd been wearing it all week to school and other events. The judge asked if the school knew about the hook. She hesitated and then said they hadn't noticed. The judge asked how that was possible. She admitted he'd kept his hand in his pocket at school. The judge asked why he needed to keep it hidden if it was so safe. She didn't have an answer. During the proceedings, Child Protective Services got involved because the woman kept saying there was nothing wrong with sending a child to a party with a weapon and defending him when he swung it at people. She told the judge that everyone else was being oversensitive and that kids need to learn to handle sharp objects, and that's how you build character. The judge did not agree. A representative from Child Protective Services testified that they had done a home visit and found several other questionable items the child had access to. Apparently, the kid had a collection of knives in his bedroom that the mother thought was fine. The judge did not think that was fine. The woman got 6 months probation, mandatory parenting classes, and a fine of $1,000. She also had to pay my medical bills, which came to $50. Child Protective Services kept her case open for monitoring and required her to remove all dangerous items from the child's access. They scheduled monthly home visits for the next 6 months. I still run parties, but now I send out a very detailed list of prohibited items beforehand. Sharp metal hooks are number 1 on that list. Real weapons of any kind are number 2. I also added a clause to my contract that says I reserve the right to ask anyone to leave if they bring something dangerous. Parents have to sign it before I agree to work their event. I haven't had another incident since. My mother started shaving my head when I was 3 years old. Twice a year she'd sit me down and buzz off all my hair. She did it at the end of winter break and again at the end of spring or summer break, whichever one lasted longer. She always said it was to prevent lice. That's what she told everyone who asked. The school counselors, the neighbors, anyone who looked at me funny. But I knew the real reason. She wanted to humiliate me. I figured this out in middle school when she shaved my sister's heads for the first time. They came home crying because other kids made fun of them. After that single time, she never touched their hair again. My sisters had beautiful golden blonde hair. They were the golden children. I wasn't. By middle school, I was finally big enough to fight back and refuse to sit in that chair. That's when the head shaving finally stopped for me. But the damage was already done. I'd spent nearly 10 years going to school bald while my sisters got to keep their hair. The head shaving was just one small part of everything else. My childhood was filled with abuse that no kid should ever have to go through. There was physical abuse that left scars I still carry on my body today. Marks from belts, switches, whatever she could grab when she was angry. There was sexual abuse too, and constant mental and emotional torture. Some of it came from my mother directly. Some of it came from other adults in my life who she let into our home. A lot of it happened at school from both teachers and students. My mother knew about all of it. She got calls from the school. Teachers tried to talk to her at parent conferences. Other parents mentioned things they'd heard. She just didn't stop it. Sometimes I think she actually encouraged it by sending me to school looking the way she did. Maybe she got something out of looking the other way. Maybe it was drugs in exchange for her silence. Maybe it was easier for her not to deal with it. Maybe hurting me made her feel better about her own pathetic life. She had mental health problems and she used them as an excuse for everything. Every terrible thing she did got a pass because of her disabilities. That's just how she was, and I was supposed to accept it. But the head shaving was its own special kind of torture. She'd do it on the last day of break so I'd show up to school On the first day back completely bald. She'd make me wear dresses too, just to make absolutely sure everyone knew I was a girl with no hair. She'd even pick out the frilliest, most feminine dresses she could find. Pink ones with bows and ruffles. I remember the first day of 4th grade so clearly. I was so nervous and sick that I ran into the girls' bathroom and threw up. All the girls screamed and ran out yelling that a boy had broken into their bathroom. That was my welcome back to school. The teasing would go on for weeks until my hair started growing back a little. Then she'd do it all over again at the end of the next break. Years passed. I survived somehow. I got big enough that she couldn't force me into that chair anymore. When I was around 18, I moved out. I thought I was finally free of her and all her cruelty. I didn't talk to her much after that. Maybe once every few months when she needed something. Then one day my phone rang. It was her. She told me she needed help and asked me to come over right away. I asked what was wrong. She said she needed me to cut her hair, but wouldn't explain why. She just kept saying it was urgent and I had to come now. That should have been my first warning sign. But I went anyway. I was curious about what could possibly have her asking me for help. She never asked me for anything. It was always my sister she called when she needed something. When I got there, she pulled me into the bathroom and showed me what she'd done. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. She'd been cutting her own hair with dog shears because her regular clippers had broken. The same dog shears she used on our old terrier. There was a 2-inch strip buzzed all around her hairline like she'd tried to give herself a bowl cut, but gave up halfway through. The rest was chopped into a complete disaster. Different lengths stuck out in every direction. Some pieces were 3 inches long, others barely an inch. It looked like she'd let a toddler attack her head with scissors. She begged me to fix it. She was almost in tears already, panicking about how bad it looked. My mother had always been so proud of her hair. Thick, gorgeous ginger locks that everyone complimented. She'd spend hours styling it, dyeing it to keep the color vibrant, treating it with expensive products. My whole family had good hair. Mine was thick and brown. My grandmother had pitch black curls. Everyone except my sister, who had the golden blonde hair to match her golden child status. I stood there looking at the mess on her head. All I could think about was every first day of school. Every time other kids pointed and laughed at me. Every time I threw up from anxiety. Every girl's bathroom I got chased out of. Every time my mother sent me out into the world bold and humiliated. I told her I could fix it. She looked so relieved. She actually smiled at me, which was rare. I brought my own hair tools. I learned a long time ago never to trust anything in that house. I set her up in a chair and got everything ready. I plugged in my clippers. She sat there chattering nervously about how embarrassed she was. She said she had a doctor's appointment in 2 days. She said she couldn't let anyone see her like this. She kept going on about how awful it would be if people saw her with messed up hair. Then I shaved it all off, every last bit. I made her just as bald as she'd made me. Twice a year for almost 10 years. She started crying before I was even done. Her hands flew up to her head, and she felt the smooth skin where her hair used to be. When I finally let her look in the mirror, she acted shocked, like she couldn't understand what had just happened. She asked what I had done and how I could do this to her. I told her I fixed it, which is what she asked me to do. She cried that she was completely bald. She asked how she was supposed to go outside like this. She asked how she was supposed to go to her doctor's appointment. She said everyone would see her. Everyone would stare. Everyone would know something was wrong with her. I packed up my clippers slowly and headed for the door. She was still sitting there, staring at herself in the mirror, running her hands over her bald head. She looked exactly like I had looked all those times, shocked and humiliated and small. I told her I didn't know how she'd manage. I said I went to school like that and I was still breathing. I reminded her that I went to school on the first day of 4th grade like that. I reminded her that I did it twice a year for almost 10 years. She just kept crying. I left her there crying over her reflection. She finally understood what it felt like to be humiliated over something she couldn't control. After years of torment, after all the abuse she put me through or let others put me through, she got a tiny taste of her own medicine. I never did find out what she expected me to do with those buzzers. She'd already shaved half her head herself with dog shears. There was no saving that mess. She had to know that. But watching her cry over losing her precious hair, the same hair she'd stolen from me over and over again, felt like the only justice I was ever going to get. I heard later from my sister that she wore hats and scarves for months while it grew back. She told everyone she'd had a medical procedure that required her to shave her head. She never admitted what really happened, and she never asked me to help her with anything ever again. I'm the youngest of 3 kids, and growing up it was mostly fine. My oldest sister is 17 years older than me, so by the time I had real memories, she was already out of the house starting her own life. We weren't close, but I didn't think we had problems either. That was before I started noticing the pattern. Every family event somehow turned into being about her or her kid. When my middle sister graduated from university, my oldest sister showed up late with her toddler and spent the whole lunch talking about potty training. When my dad got promoted at work, she turned the celebration dinner into a slideshow of her son's daycare photos. Nobody ever called it out. We all smiled and nodded because that's what you do to keep the peace. Turning 18 felt different though. It was the last birthday before real adulthood, the last one where I could actually be a kid about it. I wanted one day that felt like it was mine. My mom asked weeks ahead what I wanted to do. I kept it simple. Dinner at my favorite restaurant with just the immediate family. My mom, dad, 2 sisters, and my aunt who basically helped raise me when my parents worked long hours. I made one specific request: cookie cake instead of regular cake. I've never liked traditional cake. The texture, the too sweet frosting, all of it makes me gag. Cookie cake though, I could eat an entire one. My mom ordered it special. Double chocolate chip with cream cheese frosting and those little sparkler candles that don't blow out. She kept telling me how good it was going to be. The day came and we met at the restaurant. My middle sister arrived first and hugged me, handing over a card with some cash inside. My aunt came next with a gift bag full of things I'd actually use. My parents were already there looking like I'd done something amazing just by turning 18. Then my oldest sister walked in with her 3-year-old son. She had this big smile and was carrying a bakery box. She said she brought cake. The table went quiet. My mom looked at me, then the box, then back at me. I said we already have cake. Cookie cake. She said she knew but thought it would be nice to have real cake too. For everyone. I reminded her I don't like regular cake. I've never liked it. That's why we have cookie cake. She said I need to learn to share the experience. It's not all about me. I actually laughed. I said it literally is all about me. It's my birthday. Her smile disappeared and her eyes went cold. She said, "Wow, selfish much?" She went out of her way to do something nice, and this is how I treat her. I pointed out that nobody asked her to bring cake. I specifically asked for cookie cake because I don't eat regular cake. I'm not going to pretend to be grateful for something I don't want on my own birthday. She turned to my mom like she expected backup, but my mom just looked uncomfortable and stayed quiet. My dad suddenly became very interested in his menu. My aunt raised her eyebrows but didn't say anything. My middle sister looked like she wanted to disappear. She said fine, whatever. She sees how it is. She shoved the cake box to the far end of the table and turned her chair so her back faced me. Her son looked confused and kept trying to get her attention, but she pulled out her phone and started scrolling hard. The meal was awful. Every time someone tried to talk to her, she gave one-word answers or just hummed. When the waiter came to take orders, she ordered for herself and her son without looking up. When my aunt tried to make a joke, she didn't even fake a smile. My mom kept giving me these looks like I should apologize. But I wasn't going to say sorry for wanting my birthday to be mine for once. My dad made awkward work talk. My middle sister kept going to the bathroom just to escape. Finally, the waiter brought out the cookie cake with the sparkler candles lit. Everyone started singing happy birthday, but it was the most awkward, half-hearted version ever. My sister didn't sing at all. She just sat there with her arms crossed. Then her son started crying. Loud, red-faced, full meltdown crying. She asked what was wrong. Her son sobbed that he wanted to blow the candles. He wanted to blow the candles. She said it was okay, he could help blow them out. I said they're sparkler candles. They don't blow out. She gave me a look that could kill. She said he's 3. He doesn't understand that. I could at least let him try. I said he can try all he wants. They literally will not go out. That's how they work. Her son kept crying and reaching for the cake. My sister stood up, grabbed her purse and the bakery box with her rejected cake. She said they're leaving. She's not going to sit here and watch me traumatize a toddler on my supposed special day. Enjoy your cookie cake. She picked up her still crying son and stormed out. The door slammed behind her. Everyone sat there quiet for a moment. My aunt said, "Well, that was dramatic." My dad actually laughed, and it broke the tension. We sang happy birthday properly, and I made a wish while the sparklers burned down. When I cut into the cookie cake, it was exactly what I wanted. Perfect. 2 days later, my mom said my sister still wasn't talking to her either. Apparently, I was selfish, ungrateful, and a terrible uncle for not letting a 3-year-old blow out candles that were impossible to blow out anyway. I never got a gift or card from her. Was honestly fine by me. The best present was having one birthday that was actually mine. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.